our framers couldn't possibly know what we are seeing today. They couldn't know anything about internet or Facebook or Twitter. And since they don't know about nuclear weapons, then they can't have possibly meant what they really said in the Constitution. And since we're so technologically advanced today, that must mean that we're intellectually superior than we were back then. And it's up to us to redefine the terms so that we can make a better document that's fundamentally flawed. But you see, that's not true. All of that is a tool to undermine the principles of liberty and change the constitutional republic into a totalitarian kingdom. We have got to be about reclaiming this truth. We have got to be about understanding liberty, because if you cannot define it, you cannot defend it. But tyranny is the same way. If you cannot define tyranny, you can't defeat it either. Dick Durbin said the other day, "What is press?" He says, we know Fox, we know AP, we know their press. But are bloggers press? Are tweeters press? He said, we need to ask 21st century questions about a document that was written 200 years ago. My response is, hey Dick, it's the First Amendment. I don't need to be government approved. That's the whole point. But we have lost sight of some very important basics. Very basic things. I teach, last year, I taught 265 lessons in 22 states. 22 of those lessons taught to high school, middle school, college campuses. I asked our young people who fought in the Revolutionary War. Inevitably, they tell me the Americans and the British. The problem was there were no Americans in the Revolutionary War. But we teach our children that it was fought between the Americans and the British so we can play it up as a foreign war and relate it to what we're doing today. But it was not a foreign war, it was a civil war. It was British citizens fighting their British government. And by the way, it wasn't a revolution per se, it was a restoration. You see, we weren't revolting against anything. It was the king who had revolted against their constitutional charter. We were trying to restore liberty. But you see, in order to understand where our Constitution comes from, you have to understand that we didn't invent it. That our framers came to this continent with their own constitutional charter, and our Constitution itself is modeled after that. You see, the colonies were inhabited by British citizens. Even Thomas Paine would say that they were a melting pot even in 1776. He said so in Common Sense. But you see, once you came here, regardless of where you came from, you became a British citizen, right? So let me ask you something. If you drive to Kansas, are you now subject to Kansas law? Right? If you pack up your house and leave Oklahoma and move and build a house in Kansas, are you now not a citizen of Oklahoma but now a citizen of Kansas? That's how it worked. No matter where you left, when you came and moved to the colonies, you became a British citizen because the colonies were owned by Great Britain. You became the subject to a king. Patrick Henry said, I have but one lamp by which my feet are guided, and that is the lamp of experience. I know no way to judge the future but by the past. Alexander Hamilton said, experience is the oracle of truth, and where its responses are unequivocal, they ought to be held to be sacred and conclusive. How many of you heard that saying, those who do not know their history are doomed to repeat it? That's what we're taught, but that's not true. Ever heard of a guy named Solomon? He said there's nothing new under the sun. You see, history always repeats itself. But those who do not know their history are doomed to repeat its mistakes. And that's exactly what we're doing. And that will be undeniable before you leave this room. Guaranteed. You see, if we're going to understand our Constitution, we're going to have to understand where our liberty came from. John Adams said, liberty must be supported at all hazards. Notice he said liberty. He didn't say health care. But since truth is an equal opportunity offender, he didn't say your Social Security either. And he didn't say your job or your home. He said your liberty must be supported at all hazards, because without liberty you would have none of those things. He said liberty must be supported at all hazards. We have a right to it derived from our Maker. How many of you have heard of a principle called natural law? Natural law teaches that we are created in the image of God. And since we are created in the image of God, we've inherited certain things from God. One thing that we've inherited from God is freedom. So raise your hand if it's your job to wake up every day and tell God how to run things. See, God has that freedom, but we inherited it, being created in His image. We haven't gotten the wisdom, and thank God we didn't get the power. But we have the freedom. We don't understand what that means, though. Because we do not want a country built on freedom alone. If we did, we'd be France. Because a country built on freedom alone means I'm free to lie, I'm free to steal, and I'm free to murder. I am free to do whatever I want to do regardless of how that hurts you. Does that sound like a nice place to live? See, freedom all by itself is anarchy. Liberty and freedom are not the same thing. Liberty is freedom plus morality. That shared morality that understands I am free to lie, I am free to steal, and I am free to murder, but I will not because it's wrong. Can I tell you something that will make your legislators upset? Sure. You want to know something that makes them mad?
Go for it.
Are you ready? Laws don't stop crimes. As an attorney who spent over a decade of her life in the criminal justice system, I can tell you two things. The criminal justice system was not designed to stop crimes. It was designed to identify criminal activity and establish a mechanism to punish criminals. Because you see, if laws stopped crimes, we would be a crime-free country because we've got way too many laws. Do you know that there are only two things that will stop a man from murdering his neighbor? Because he is free to murder his neighbor anytime he wants to. But he may suffer the consequences, but you have to admit, anyone is free to murder their neighbor anytime they want to. There are only two things that will stop them. I am free to murder my neighbor anytime I want to, but I will not because it's wrong. That's what's wrong with our society, completely void of morality today. The other thing, I am free to murder my neighbor anytime I want to, but I won't because he's well armed. John Adams said, liberty must be supported at all hazards. We have a right to it derived from our Maker, but if we had not, our fathers have bought and purchased it for us with their ease, their estates, their pleasure, and their blood. John Adams is telling us in 1765, by the way, we didn't invent liberty, we inherited it. Just how deeply did we inherit? Well, you've got to go back to 1045 to understand where our liberty came from. Now, in 1045, Great Britain was a kingdom, just like it was in 1776. But Great Britain is a unique kingdom. You see, if you live in a kingdom, that means the king holds all the power and hands out the rights as he sees fit. And if the king can hand out rights, what can he do? Take them away. Now, when you live in a kingdom, you have this cool thing called the whim of the sovereign. Ever heard this saying, it's good to be king? Or if you're Obama, it's good to be president, because he doesn't recognize the difference. Right? Okay. So, it's good to be king because you have the whim of the sovereign, which means anything you want to do, you can do it anytime you want to. Which means when you live in a kingdom and you're the subject to a king, you literally wake up every single day wondering what's right and what's wrong today, because your rights and privileges can change just like that. By the way, That's why we're different from a kingdom. As a constitutional republic, you can't get any more different than a kingdom. King holds all the right, hands out the powers. As he holds all the power, hands out the rights and privileges.